What I'd like to share with you tonight are my observations in the last few years on the war that is being waged against Israel. And it is not the war that you may hear about in the news. It is not a war that is waged by tanks or by airplanes or by rockets or through tunnels. Those exist as well. But this is a different kind of war, and yet it is still very much a war. And I use this word with precision. It is a war that is being waged by other means, by words, by images, by ideas. So supposedly, these means are not violent. When you hear people that are speaking about the battle that is being waged against Israel, that it is non-violent. Some people even say Israel should be pleased. Its enemies, its rivals, finally have chosen the path of non-violence. And for a moment you imagine that standing across from us are Martin Luther King, Gandhi, and Mandela, who, by the way, in parentheses, believed in using violence when it serves their cause. But somehow the notion is that if the battle that is waged against Israel is waged by non-violent means, we should assume something positive about the purpose, about the ends. That somehow this is, of course, a battle for a beneficial purpose, for a positive cause. But I want to argue that there's absolutely no connection. You can have a violent struggle, and we've had many of those in history, for a noble cause, for a just cause. And you can have a non-violent struggle for a very sinister cause. And I want to argue that this is what we're seeing here. We're seeing a non-violent battle, a war that is waged by non-violent means, but ultimately for a very sinister and a violent end. And what is this war? What is happening here? What is its purpose? Because so many say, well, this is just about policies. This is criticism of Israel. So this war is waged by one main strategy, and you'll know it very well. I call it the placard strategy. Why? Because you've seen it in all the demonstrations. People hold placards. And those placards say, Israel equals, Zionism equals. And the placard strategy is not just used in demonstrations. It's used everywhere. I can tell you that in every debate, every speech in which I participate, and there is an anti-Israel speaker, even if they're giving 30 seconds, they will manage to insert quite a few words into those 30 seconds. And what are those words? Well, on the placards, as I'm sure you've noticed, when it says Zionism equals, somehow it never says Zionism equals the political movement for national self-determination of the Jewish people in their ancient homeland. Right? That's not what the placards say. By the way, I think I'm going to now make it into a t-shirt. I have this idea of starting to use it into our own placards and t-shirts. But that's not what they say. You may all be Zionists, you may all be supporters of Israel, but this strategy has been so effective that you know precisely what those placards say. You know, they say Zionism equals racism, colonialism, imperialism, ethnic cleansing, and recently, apartheid, of course, very popular in recent years, and recently joined the club since last summer, genocide. Now, all these words, people on the other side will tell you, have been chosen because they reflect reality. This is what's happening on the ground. So, let's check. I'll start from the toughest one, from genocide, from the summer. When this word started to appear in the various tweets over the summer's war, naturally I thought, okay, this is beyond. Even as much as I'm aware of this campaign and how sinister it is, I was like, this is too much. There's no way that people will take it. But very quickly, this stuck. This was accepted very quickly. I can tell you that in meetings I had in the past month since this summer, I was in Ireland, I met some members of parliament, One of them told me, it's a shame the genocide that Israel committed this summer. A member of parliament. And when I told him, no, that was not what happened this summer. And he was like, we'll agree to disagree. I was like, no, we will not agree to disagree. This is not one of those minor disagreements where we each go our own way. And I argued with him, and ultimately he had to call an end to the meeting. But these things stick. Now, sometimes it seems that humor is the only way to battle it. The Jewish people have used it on occasion. One of my favorite was a kind of mock article that appeared when this word started to appear this summer that said, the mock title of the article said the following: Israel's Minister for Genocidal Affairs forced to quit after repeated failures. And, sometimes you think, hey, this is the only way to even handle such smears and libels and allegations. And it is truly amazing when you think and you're saying, but there's nothing. The facts are not there. Hundreds of thousands of people are being butchered across the Middle East. Search for hashtag genocide Syria. It doesn't exist. Search for hashtag genocide Israel, genocide Gaza, of course. 2,000 people were killed. 1,000 of them militants. People who have fought against soldiers. Soldiers came back from the front saying, if this is not a war, we don't know what is. This is not genocide. Not even close. Not in intent, not in action, but it sticks. It sticks also because there's something excellent in blaming the Jews for genocide. Because if you blame the Jewish people for genocide, well, perhaps retroactively the genocide against them was justified. It certainly deprives them of any kind of moral claim they can have. And ethnic cleansing, another one of my favorites. Well, if Zionism and Israel are about ethnic cleansing, I can tell you we're very bad at it. We have failed miserably. The number of Arabs between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River who are sharing the land with the Jewish people is equal. There has not been ethnic cleansing. Yes, in 1948 there was a war. There were many wars in the 40s and 50s. India and Pakistan and across Europe. Populations were moved, people moved. When new borders were established, new states born. No one considers that ethnic cleansing. No more do you have refugees from those wars. They have all been absorbed into their countries. Only in the 40s, Israel remains somehow a country engaged in ethnic cleansing. Whereas actually, if you think about it, the very effective ethnic cleansing was on the other side. Because when the United Nations recommended partition between a Jewish state and an Arab state, there were Arabs in the Jewish state and Jews in the Arab state. Lo and behold, there's a war, and after the war, there are Arabs in the Jewish state, and there are no Jews in the Arab areas. How did that happen? 20% of Israel's citizens are Arabs, almost all Muslims. Israel has the largest Muslim minority in the world by proportion. Only France, Russia, India come close. Of course, the absolute numbers are larger. Ethnic cleansing? Not at all. If there was any ethnic cleansing, in addition to the areas in the West Bank and Gaza, it's the Jews who lived in Arab lands. Nearly 1 million Jews within a period of short few years. These are communities that existed pre-Islam, forced to flee, leave everything behind, just because they dared to be equal. The Jews who for about 1,000 years lived as second-class, third-class citizens in Arab lands. They like to tell us the story that Jews and Arabs lived in harmony under Islam. I like to compare it to say that it's about as if saying that whites and blacks lived in harmony and gone with the wind. So yes, as long as people knew their place, they lived in harmony. But the moment that the Jews dared to be equal, to demand sovereignty, to want their own state, to stand up a little, that's when they were forced out. They could no longer live it. That was ethnic cleansing. And we can go this way word by word. Apartheid, an entire libel and smear. You just need to go to Israel's parliament, courts, hospitals, streets, and see that there's no apartheid. Yes, there are always problems between majorities and minorities in many countries, but no one calls them apartheid. So why are these words chosen when they're so flagrantly not in touch with reality? These words for the placards are chosen because they all share something in common. They are universally considered evil. We by now have almost an international consensus. And all of these words have been chosen because they're considered evil. Racism, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, genocide. So when these words appear next to Zionism equal, Israel equals, the effect is to repeat and repeat and repeat the underlying mantra. Zionism is evil. Israel is evil. Zionism is evil. Israel is evil. Again and again and again and again. And what does that achieve? It ultimately achieves an intellectual atmosphere in which a world without Israel is considered a better world. Where ridding the world of Israel is to be desired, even noble. If you tell people again and again and again, this is evil, then people of goodwill want to rid the world of the evil. Anyone who thinks of themselves as a person of goodwill will mobilize to rid the world of evil. And that's the thing. When you prepare people's minds to think that what they're doing is noble, they can commit some of the worst atrocities. Because no one ever thinks they're doing something bad. And if you tell them, Israel and Zionism are evil, the world would be better off with them, ultimately you create an environment where physically ridding the world of Israel is not considered an atrocity, not considered bad. It would be considered desired, noble. And this is why I take this very seriously. This is why I view it as one of the greatest threats that Israel is facing. Not the tunnels, not the tanks, not the rockets, not the airplanes. Because ideas matter. And if you create an intellectual, normative environment where the existence of the country is not desirable, where more and more people mobilize to a cause of ridding the world of that country, then ultimately the physical reality will follow. Because this is something in the nature of Israel, the positive nature of Israel. Israel is a country that was first born here. It was born of people's minds and visions and dreams. They first dreamt about it and wrote about it, and then they went about to create the modern state of Israel. So those who want the modern state of Israel to disappear understand something very fundamental about Israel. Maybe not consciously. But they understand that if you make the idea of Israel so despicable, something that no one would want to touch, mobilize for, protect, then ultimately the physical reality will follow. Just as the physical reality followed the idea in its creation, then the physical reality will follow the idea and its destruction. And the first phase is to make sure that the idea is considered evil, the foundational idea of Israel. The idea that the Jewish people as a people have a right to self-determination in their ancient homeland, this idea is to be unacceptable, made something that no one will want to defend, no one will want to mobilize to. So this is what we're facing. This is the nature of the war, and this is why I view it as a strategic threat. This is why I invest much of my time in battling on what I see as the new front lines of this war. So what does it really mean to battle in this war? What do we need to do? So the first phase is what I'm doing here and in many other places, to open people's eyes to what is actually happening. Because so many of us would like to believe that this is about a debate on policy, that this is about legitimate criticism of Israel's actions. We want to believe that this is something minor, unimportant, by fringe groups. But it's none of that. It is a war waged for a very sinister purpose. And by the way, it's waged by nonviolent means, not because those on the other side have become pacifists. It's just because all other means have failed them. They have failed to rid the world of Israel by violent means, by military invasions, by terrorism, by economic boycotts, such as the Arab boycott. They have failed again and again and again. So they have not given up. They have just sought new ways. And this is the new way. Non-violent means, but just a sinister purpose. So first is to realize what's going on. And yes, somehow it always needs to be said, there is no problem to have a critical debate of Israel. I can tell you something. I know when I engage in a serious reasoned debate of Israel. Somehow people say it's a very thin line. It is actually not a thin line. I know when I go on the media or participate in panels, it's very evident when there is a public, serious, reasoned debate on policy. I can tell very quickly what that looks like. But too often, this is not what it's all about, and you can identify it by the placard strategy. If the speaker across from you quickly moves to use all of these words, you know they're not engaged in a reasoned debate about policy. Such debate can exist. It does not include the placard strategy. So we need to know first what's going on. Then we need to do what we did every time we faced a real and serious strategic threat, and that's mobilize. We need to mobilize resources, financial, people, leadership. We need more and more of our leaders to devote time to this. I can tell you that one of the problems I faced in Israel, in many ways you've noticed the threat way before Israelis did, because you're much more on the front line of that than people in Israel thought they were. I was a member of the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee in the previous parliament. And when I started speaking about it about 5 years ago, as you can imagine, the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee in Israel is, well, it's mostly the Defense Committee, not much effort to Foreign Affairs, mostly the Defense Committee, and as you can imagine, a very testosterone-filled committee. So when I started speaking there about a war of words and images and ideas, I would get those looks and kind of symbolic pats on the head of kind of, that's adorable, look at that girl, like words and images and ideas, that's really sweet. And there was no sense, real wars were the wars with tanks and airplanes or terrorism or what it may be. But I think in the last few years, more and more of our leaders have come to appreciate what's going on. Still not enough. Still, if you look at Israel's budget, we spend about 60 billion shekels on our physical defense, and let's say the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is 1.6 billion shekels. So we are not yet devoting the leadership, the financial, the people resources. Because if you think about it, when Zionism just started, legitimacy was the one thing we needed more than anything. So we sent our best and brightest to get legitimacy, whether it was with Lord Balfour or later in the United Nations. We sent the best people out there so that the Zionist idea, so that the state of Israel will have legitimacy. We will have friends and we will have support. And then we started focusing, sadly, on physical defense, and we sent our best and brightest to our physical defense. And I believe that, yet again, we need to start sending our best and brightest to our intellectual defense. And this is a bit of kind of my figment of imagination of what we need to create, but you can imagine it already exists. I call it the IDF. You know, when Israel needed physical defense, we created the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces. I argue that now we need the IDF, the Israel Intellectual Defense Forces. We need intellectual warriors. We need people who wage intellectual battle with words and with images and ideas. So we need the resources, we need the people, we need the mobilization, we need the strategy. First of all, we cannot leave any arena open. So many times we say, okay, this is crazy. We're not going to go there. We leave things open. But in the era of the internet, if you don't answer things, they stick. If you don't respond, if you don't tear it apart, it stays. So we need to speak up. And I know many say, we're not going to dignify those crazy allegations with a response. Well, if we don't dignify them, they stay. So we need to respond in every arena, all the time. And we need to go on the offensive. Not just to defend very well. You know, the doctrine of the Israel Defense Forces was to take the war to the enemy's territory. We should be doing that intellectually as well. We so rarely are willing to talk about the sinister motives, the rejectionism, the complete lack of respect for human rights that exists on the other side. The lies, the libels. We need to go on the attack there as well. And we need to share information. A lot of people are coming up with good ideas. They need to share them with other people who need those good ideas. So, to the extent that you want, you're welcome to feel yourself as members, recruits of the IIDF. So these are the things that we need. We need the resources, we need the mobilization, we need the strategy. And I will say that this is for the long haul. We often think about it as something short, quick. Let's get a really good argument and we'll win this battle. If we only had an articulate English speaker who would go on the media and stick it to the other speaker, we'll win. It doesn't work like that. It is a continuous, exhausting battle. I'm sure many of you are exhausted by now already. But we need to understand that this is the nature. It might take 20, 30 years to reach victory. And I want to say something about this word victory, because I think this should be our goal, victory. And I know it sounds like a very quaint concept. Victory? Who wins wars anymore? But I want to argue that this is where we need to aim. Not just scoring some points, having a tie. We need to win. And you might say, well, what does victory look like in a war of words and images and ideas? Well, I've come up with a simple definition. My definition of victory is the day that hold rabid anti-Israel and anti-Zionist views will have the social acceptability of neo-Nazis. That's my definition of victory. Again? Yes. My definition of victory is that the day that those who hold rabid anti-Israel and anti-Zionist views will have the social acceptability that neo-Nazis enjoy today. And why do I define it in this way? Because my definition of victory is about reversing the social acceptability equation. Today, anti-Zionism, anti-Israel views are those that gain you social acceptability. In some circles, in academic circles with students, this is where social acceptability exists. If you dare be a Zionist, a pro-Israeli person, well, you often don't speak. You feel that this will cast you outside the social acceptability circle. Certainly young people feel that way. So the idea is to reverse the social acceptability, because that's how you measure who's winning and who's losing. Politics is important, votes are important, but over time, ideas are measured by social acceptability and who's relegated to the margins. And that's my definition of victory. So I will end by saying this. It took us years and decades to win our wars. It took us 25 years to get the combined armies of the Arab countries to finally give up on invading Israel. It took us several decades to break out of the Arab boycott and build a world-class export-based economy that does not depend on the region. It took us decades to beat terrorism to a point that while people continue to want to act on it, life in Israel can continue normally and people can enjoy the beach in Tel Aviv. And I will argue that ultimately here, with mobilization, with resources, with a clear purpose and strategy, we will win. Because if there's any war that the Jewish people and our friends should be able to win, it's a war of words.